Hey, I'm Travis, co-founder of the Mercer Club. If you're watching this, it's because you have a great idea, but you need to figure out if everyone will love it just as much as you do. The best way to do this is to create an MVP. I know the word MVP may sound unfamiliar, but keep watching. Today, you're going to learn how to test your business idea and verify that people want it before you waste time and money on it. But first, before we get into it, here's a little bit more about me and my startup, the Mercer Club. So the Mercer Club is a subscription-based service that launched in 2019. We allow our users to rent expensive streetwear at a fraction of the cost to buy it. Our company is very unique in that we are the first company of our kind within the sharing economy. So that's something I went to Penn State University. Well, to even take a step back, I'm from New Jersey, northern New Jersey. I went to Penn State University. Coming into college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I played sports, and for so much of my life, I was like dedicated to basketball and making it as a basketball player. I was a little bit irrational, but that was just where my head was. So I went into college. I wanted to walk on, but I'm also Nigerian, and immigrant parents are always like, you better just do something that makes money. So I was just like, all right, what I want to do that can make my parents proud and also sort of facilitate a better life for me. And that led me to majoring in economics. After I graduated with my economics degree, I was also sort of really I've always loved art as a whole. So I created this talent management company called Courthouse Management. And, through there, I was able to book client engagements with press, studio sessions, touring. This was like the beginning of the streaming phase too. So, I was very active in figuring out how that all worked. Like getting your music on to like a DSP was a lot harder in like 2013 than it is now, 2013, 2014. So yeah, but doing that on a boutique level, even though it wasn't this super successful company, it sort of helped reinvigorate the idea that this love that I've had for, art and fashion. And that led me and my co-founder / best friend, Chike Achebe, to conceive the Mercer Club. After he had graduated from Harvard Law School, we kind of said to ourselves, we want to do something. And honestly, we have all these ideas. I love fashion. I still find myself spending more money than I should on clothing. And, the advent of sort of assessing the problem and the need helped us cultivate this idea of the Mercer Club. And, here we are a year and change later, still at it. So that makes me really happy. So an MVP, the exact terminology for it is a minimally viable product. And the best way to look at an MVP is it's the smallest, least, most basic version of what your idea is. And you just want to have the most basic stripped down version of that so that you can, take it to market as soon as possible and create a user database of just, what they think about the product, that you can use that to scale out and gradually build the product that you envision, but also is one that other future potential users can, gravitate towards, because the early adopting users you've had, they've already proven that this is a valuable commodity as far as an idea. I think at its core, one of the key things you want to make sure you're doing is just not spending a lot of money on this MVP. You don't want to, you don't really want to expend too many resources in just having, because this is really a test dynamic for you to just gauge people's interest and whether the idea is a valuable one at that. So, one example of that would be to just do sketches. You can present the sketches sort of main screen or on like a web page format. And all you're really doing is highlighting the idea and just letting people sort of draw their own conclusions based off of this sketched out idea that shouldn't cost you really any money, especially if you have an idea of how to do the sketches on your own. Another example of this would be a wireframe. And wireframes, they demonstrate the system elements that how your product would look as far as like an app or a website, and kind of shows the flow of the way things would work. And obviously there's also the mock-up. You can do a mock-up version of that. These are all things that are free for the most part. I think, like I said before, you really want to focus on an idea that, or a concept, an MVP example that isn't going to deplete you of resources or finances. Because one of the things I've seen in the startup community is like, you can have a great idea, but if you don't have any money to implement it, you know, it's kind of, futile. So definitely the core idea, I think, with an MVP is just creating something that you don't find yourself spending too many resources on before you get to the stage of people giving you feedback as far as whether this is a valuable commodity. I think you can have all of those other ideas that you have along the way, but at its initial implementation phase, have the most valuable idea of those and the most basic version of that you think can give people immediate value. You know what I'm saying? I think once people have an immediate value and you see that there's traction, you see that there's other people actually thinking this is a valuable product, then you can actually start to build on some of the other ideas. But if at its core, it isn't an idea that people are resonating with, then that's when you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out just, how you can create something that people are going to want to use and build on that. Like I said, the shipping time frames, just how to just be more tightened with that. We learned that we would need to have more of just a rigid process for everything as far as getting items cleaned, what items people wanted. I think that was another important thing for us, is like sort of sitting back. Initially, we didn't have sneakers on our platform, but we've been noticing over time that, like, people would always like, you have shoes. Can I have some shoes on the website? I would like to rent some shoes. And that's a little bit more tricky too, because sneakers, they can get dirty easier. So we kind of had to build out a framework of how that would look as far as cleaning the shoes and which shoes people would want. One interesting thing we did early on, like after the initial early adopter phase, like entering Y Combinator, is we started doing these like surveys, like type form surveys, where we were able to, after we sort of built out our friends and family early adopter group, we started, marketing to other people we didn't know. Some of that was like Reddit, some of that was Facebook groups, and just also word of mouth. And from there, also publications. I think an important part of this MVP thing to understand is that it doesn't hurt to sell an idea that isn't completely fleshed out. Just selling someone on the actual idea of what you're doing, people on the idea. You'd be surprised how often in the startup space people are just selling stuff that product doesn't even exist. They're just selling the idea. And if your pitch is good enough, people are gonna, respond to that, and will, not everyone, but some people will, and those people will help you give you hardcore feedback. Because with us, once we got out of the friends and family early adopter phase, and we started getting to strangers who were paying, then we're really getting like critical feedback of like, a friend or family might just be like, I think you guys should do this. Someone who's paying that doesn't know you is going to email you like, yo, this is bullshit. I don't like X, Y, Z in the third. And if it's not changed, I want my money back, or else, I'm going to fucking keep calling. You know what I mean? Like, so that's something that was very important for us to sort of get the additional layer of early adopter feedback, was like friends and family. And then all of a sudden we have first couple, people that we don't know who are now, utilizing the platform and have like, unfiltered feedback about things they want to be changed, things they want to see on the site. And that was all, still is, so much of what we do is just iterating. I think as a startup founder, you have to tell yourself that change is inevitable and there's nothing wrong with change. And once you do that, you kind of develop this cycle of constantly iterating and constantly, improving your product. And I don't think anyone should ever be ashamed of like having to change something that wasn't a part of the plan, or having to change. A lot of the best startups were, they might have had an idea, but the idea that gave them success wasn't even an idea that they had conceived. I remember in Y Combinator, I forgot what the founder's name was. One of the founders of Reddit was just telling us about how Reddit started and how like that was like a side project. They weren't even really excited about it. They were kind of just doing it, and then they kind of gradually started seeing people were more and more invested in the idea, and they started kind of taking it more seriously. Twitter, Jack Dorsey, when they created Twitter, the concept of trending topics wasn't even, they never thought about that. That was just something that the early adopters were like, hey, we want to know what everyone else is talking about in this area, so make trending topics. And they did it, and that's still to this day is one of their most vital features. They still build on it. All the best startups still are actively improving their startup, actively changing, actively iterating. That phase you should never lose sight of, because that's going to be a consistent thread to everything you're doing. It's like growing, learning, adapting, iterating, just constantly every day. Find out what your users are telling you. A lot of times you're not going to be happy with what the users are telling you. It's going to be like a cold hard look in the mirror of like, yo, we got to improve this, we got to change it, we have to make it better. And it's important, whatever changes you're making, you make those changes like quick ones. I think another thing with the startup space is like, sometimes people will assess a problem, but they won't have the tools or the forward thinking and ability to fix that problem as soon as you can. Because if you don't, there could be a competitor out there, someone you presented this idea to, who's like, hey, I want to do that idea too, and I think I can do that idea better. So you always want to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, if you're not improving or constantly iterating and improving your product, there's probably someone else out there who has a similar idea who's going to do it. And the last thing you want to see is someone take your idea and make a better version of it. Yeah, I think there's like a healthy balance between the two. I think I do agree with the point of getting it right first. Like, you know, one of the key things they always said in Y Combinator, specifically Michael Seibel, was that don't worry about getting 10,000 users and just having a whole bunch of users with a flawed product. Focus on having 100 users that love your product. You know what I'm saying? Don't even, because if you get 100 users that love, not just like it, love it, like are like really, they can't go, they can't see themselves without your product in their life. And I think a lot of the best startups out there, if you look at what they do, you know, you probably even know this with whatever are some of your favorite tech companies that you apps or whatever. You know, if those apps didn't exist, your life would inherently be a little bit more complicated, right? You know what I mean? Like, if it sounds a little cliche or insignificant, but you know, anytime Instagram is down, people lose their minds. You know? People are like, "Oh my God, Instagram is down. What are we gonna do? How do I live? Like, where do my pictures go?" You know what I mean? Like, you want to create something that people love it. At least your core user base loves it so much that in the event that it didn't exist, or it was your servers were down, whatever the case may be, people would genuinely be like, "Oh my God, like how do I operate?" You know what I'm saying? Even if that didn't last, the initial phase of it would be like, what am I going to do right now? Because you've developed a product that was so incredibly valuable to whatever their lifestyle is, that they now are not only deeming this as something they need, but they're also doing the heavy lifting of like spreading the word for you, right? Because any app you probably loved, you've probably been able to you probably told at least 5 or 10 other people that, you know, this app exists, this app is dope. And you also kind of get cool points, right? Because it's like, if you know, like if you were the first person to tell your friends about Twitter, you kind of have that, kind of like new music, you kind of have that like, oh, like I told you, yeah, I know this stuff. Ability over your friends, and you're kind of like hipper than they are to some extent. So yeah, I think the core focus is just, obviously you want the time component, you want to move quickly, but amidst moving quickly, you want to also move with precision, you want to move with tact, and you want to move with a purpose so that as you're moving quickly, you're not just moving quickly in the wrong direction. You know what I'm saying? You want to kind of, each time you're making a quick movement, try to assess the response to that movement. And if you're seeing you might be going in the wrong direction, then it doesn't hurt to kind of scale back and then revise that idea to something that can actually add more value to people's lives. I think at its earliest stage, you just want to do the market research of whatever field you're planning on tackling. Do the market research on the whole field. Try to get a good awareness of just what, what's going on, sort of the new ideas, the new people that are involved, some of the new concepts that have been involved. And then from there, you want to create a value add. Like, think of a way that a flaw in the system or in that field can be improved upon, and how you can add value to that thing that you've seen as theoretically a flaw in your eyes. And then once you do that, you want to map out sort of the user flow of how this is all going to look, as far as, and that could be what you're referring to as far as the landing page, is just how some of this can, sort of these nuts and bolts of your idea would actually look in the real world, whether or not you're actually implementing that, but just sort of the idea of these ideas being configured visually so someone can see that. And then, you want to prioritize sort of the features of the MVP itself, and what your MVP is planning on accomplishing as far as like the core functionalities of it. And then once you do that, then you launch. Once you launch it, you start getting real world feedback from other people that aren't you or someone on your team. And then after that, you just, it's a cycle of getting user data, analyzing that user data, and consistently building out improved versions of what users have told you could be improved with your idea. So I think those are the main steps: is, market research, figuring out the value add, mapping out user flow, getting your MVP features, correct, launching it, and then the iteration phase is just seeing what users want, talking to them consistently, talk to your users as much as you can. It also helps develop sort of a rapport, and it helps users feel like they're invested. I mean, they are in theory, but they're like invested in, like your idea. I know for us personally, a lot of the early calls we had, there were people that were just excited that a founder would call them and ask for help in any capacity, that they would just think like, oh, like I'm a part of this. Like I'm helping to shape this company's outlook. And you're also going to see that they're more empathetic. We got a cat involved. This guy just ran across my laptop. Sorry. This is my cat. But yeah, so you want to, what was I saying?
Like get user feedback, and you were saying that.
Oh, yeah. You want to essentially just, so that's what I was saying. Amidst getting the user feedback, people feel like they're part of the process. They feel like they have more involvement. Oh my God, dude.
The cat. What's your cat's name?
The cat's name is Tito.
Tito.
He's just Tito. Yeah, he's just over here. I think he sees that I'm occupied, and he's like, ooh.
Yeah, he's like, look,
bother him.
You have to give me attention in for a minute. So
yeah,
that is hilarious.
But yeah, just essentially, I found from what we were doing with doing our user calls is like people felt excited about being a part of the product development stage. They felt excited about the fact that a founder was even contacting them and asking their opinion. And they also were like more empathetic. Not everyone, but most people are a little bit more empathetic when you kind of break it down. Like, hey, listen, this is a new idea. This is something that it's going to have some flaws. So I just want to give you that disclaimer in advance so that you're aware of like, what to expect. And you know, having empathetic early adopters is definitely important, because the last thing you want to keep your retention levels at a reasonable level. You don't want your churn to be high. You don't want people just signing up and then being like, "Oh, this shit sucks. I'm out of here. I don't want to use this thing." And the thing is, too, the first impression is very important, because if you mess up the first impression with some of these early users, they're never going to return. So whatever you have to do to get them to like your product, love it, I would say do that. Always ask them. Feel free to be kind. It's really a customer service skill set, honestly. You know, a lot of the other founders that we had spoke, like the more accomplished ones, the Airbnb guys, their story is incredible. When they came to speak with us, these guys were just talking. I mean, you want to talk about like just stick-wittiveness. These guys were just, there were so many times upon the Airbnb creators' journey that they could have just packed up shop and then, you know, been like, this isn't going to work. It's never going to work. But they really sort of made a point of emphasis of getting users that love their product, and any users that did love their product, like really like keeping them involved and constantly having them involved in the process of improving the app. Because, you know, it's critical to your success that you have actual users that think this is a viable product. So whatever way you can get them to love your product, or just at least stay with your product until it gets to a point that they can love it, I would definitely advise doing that, because there's so many points where, you know, as a minimal viable product, there's going to be flaws with it. That's just, I don't think anyone has ever created a minimal that, you know, just sort of having a rapport with the users that aren't your family or friends is very critical, because like I said, you don't want too much churn. You don't want this thing to blow up in your face before it gets to a level of real widespread value. And sometimes people can think of the startup life as sort of this glossy. There's a lot of blue collar, very like tedious work that's probably you're gonna feel at times like beneath you, depending on whatever your degree situation is or whatever you've done before this. You're gonna kind of feel like you've taken a step back, but at its core, that's the startup grind. Trust me when I tell you, any of these startups that have succeeded, the people that are in charge have had a level of like severe, like just, you know, hand to paper to pad, like just really rugged start to the whole process that doesn't get, you know, highlighted as some sort of cool, fancy, you know, job initially. But, you know, the idea is that you have to kind of like work through the mud. It's never going to be, you know, by virtue of it being a startup, it's going to be an idea that many people are going to be like, oh, that can't work. That doesn't make any sense. Why would I need that? You know what I mean? Like, if this was 1991, the idea of like Uber would probably just feel so like, for what? Like, we have taxis. We don't need Uber. You know what I mean? But you kind of find like the more you kind of push the idea out there and just create something that people need in that moment, in that time frame, it's so critical to your company's success. So I would definitely advise people to not be too cool to call users, not be too cool to, you know, have a user tell them their product sucks. You know, that's one of the most critical feedback loops that I've gotten. Like, it obviously helps when people tell you your product's amazing, but, you know, be prepared for feedback that isn't favorable. Be prepared for feedback that's harsh. You know, Michael Seibel was our mentor. He was, you know, our lead partner. We were in his group, and dude, Michael Seibel, I love that dude, but he was got to be the meanest partner at YC. I mean, he's no holds bar. He'll tell you to your face, this shit sucks. Told us multiple times what we were showing him sucked. And that's very humbling, you know? Like I said, like, plenty of kids, people in the startup space, specifically Y Combinator, that are MIT grads, Dartmouth, you know, Ivy Leaguers, just people that they might have been done product jobs at like other, you know, startups, Stripe, you know, Bumble, whatever, other startup they were at. So to hear that from people like, that are respected is like, it's very, it takes a lot out of your pride. And I saw other, founders over time, you could tell their psyche was being drained traumatically just by, constantly being told this isn't good enough, constantly not seeing the results from all the work they're doing. And that's a very defeating feeling. And it's honest, but it's like, I think as a startup founder, the biggest things I would tell like a CEO or anyone in the startup space is like, as far as like gauging the viability of their MVP, I would say before that, I would just say gauge the viability, gauge the space of your mental health. You know what I mean? Because you can have all the frameworks, all the technical things you need, but by virtue of what we do in the startup space, there's going to be ups and downs, and there may be downs for an extended period of time. You never know how long it's going to be. But the important thing I've seen is like people's mental health can really be trained. And like, especially as Black people, our mental health, we have a tendency to sort of overlook that. For so many years, people might have kind of just looked at, bringing that up as some sort of a weakness. And I think it's really important that people sort of just kind of say to themselves, hey, listen, this is going to be an inherently hard job. And I need to sort of tell myself that my mental health is the utmost responsibility. If this fails or succeeds, this doesn't mean that I am a failure. There's so many stories of people who failed and failed and failed and failed and failed and failed. And I don't even like using the term failed. It just didn't work. Because failure, it sounds like there's a finality to it. And I don't really like the idea of like failing. It's like, it didn't work. It didn't work. Revise it, iterate, come back with precision, with tact, with a new, better idea than what you had, and just keep doing that. You know what I'm saying? Don't quit. Don't feel defeated, because there's going to be plenty of moments where you will be defeated. And that's just life, honestly. But at its core, just tell yourself, hey, my mental health is of the utmost value to me at this moment. I can't possibly be a successful startup founder if my mental health is shaky and I'm supposed to try to lead other people, whatever the case may be. Me myself, this is like full on candid level, but I feel like this could help someone else who may have been dealing with some sort of a mental health burden. Like I was, before I got involved with the Mercer Club when I was in college, like my grades weren't the greatest at a certain period of time, but I'd always done well in school. But I wasn't really putting forth the effort that I needed, and I was seeing that the results weren't getting me there. And I just fell into a depression, to be completely fair and frank. I was like super depressed. This was probably like my junior year of college. Super depressed, and I was just like, man, like, what am I doing? I kind of was just like, when you're depressed, you're kind of just like floating through life. Everything is kind of just happening. And the saddest, scariest part about it was I was like, I was just pretending to be okay to everyone, that was around, that was asking if I was okay, my family, my friends. And that was just like a slow death, man, because, when you're depressed, it's just like, there's this really like just heavy feeling of just like nothing is going to change. And you don't really know how to work your way out of it. You don't really know how to, also, like I said, you might be embarrassed to tell other people you're depressed. Or just feeling some sort of like burden amidst that phase. And I as someone who's been there and has been able to, at the time I was able to talk to like certain therapists who were able to help me, or a therapist who was able to help me sort of just like channel some of the inner angst and anxiety that I may have had into sort of a more productive outlook as far as how I could change my own outlook. Now, everyone's different. Everyone is going to deal with these things differently. But for me, what helped was just sort of like telling myself that like, I'm not a failure because of this circumstance. You know what I'm saying? And I'm committed to the idea of finding the silver lining in all things and using that, even if it's a sliver of positivity, to keep me going and keep me, cognizant of the idea that this end game is possible, end game towards success. And yeah, I would just say to anyone out there who, and if anyone who is listening to this does have something they want to talk to on a mental health level, I've always said, you know, I want to, as someone who's dealt with that, I want to be an advocate to help others. So, you know, feel free to email me or contact me on social media. I'm always available to speak. Just wanted to say that, you know, there's this perception of what a startup founder looks like white, nerdy. He wears fucking t-shirt, the same t-shirt every day. And like, you know, that's what people think of the tech startup founder. But, you know, I implore everyone who is listening to this to say to themselves, the tech founder of the new age, the modern age, looks like me. Looks like I can wear what I want to wear. I can, you know, be who I want to be. I don't have to conform to like this idea of I have to, you know, if you are that sort of tech personality, there's nothing wrong with that. Be that person. But if you are someone that likes tech but also likes cooking or, you know, just other things that may have your appearance or the way you speak a little differently, don't be ashamed of that. Live in your truth. Because at the end of the day, if you have a great idea, no one's going to care. You know what I mean? So I would definitely say stay true to yourself, be who you are. Don't think that you have to be like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and all robotic and pale and shit. You can be who you want to be. And if your idea is valid and proven, people are going to respect who you are anyway. And you're also going to lead the way for future generations of Black people to see that, yo, I don't have to look like Mark Zuckerberg. I can, you know, wear my braids like Britney. I can do whatever the hell I want to do. And I'm still going to get the respect out here that I deserve. And it's that.